the Ray Show podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Ray, and we are coming to you live from beautiful downtown Athens, Georgia. And today on the podcast, we have a guest that we've wanted since the beginning of this podcast, and that is Mr. David J. Haskins. David J. is going to be here today to talk about Night Crickets, an amazing new project that he's completed, and it is out for your listening pleasure. And we're also going to talk about Bauhaus. Obviously, they're out touring, and I caught them at the Cruel World Festival out in beautiful, lovely, sunny California back in May. And we'll talk about that performance and, it's all good things, especially his amazing book that you've got to check out. So just want to remind everyone that we will have the live dates coming up soon. We'll be announcing those. I know I say that every podcast, but they are about to be within your grasp. So keep an eye on all our socials and the website for information on how you can attend one of the live tapings we're going to do at Cine. But without further delay, let's get to my talk with Mr. David J. Haskins. All right, we are here with David J. of the Mighty Night Crickets and also Bauhaus. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing splendidly, thank you.
Well, it's an honor to have you on the podcast here on the Ray Show podcast. Thanks for taking time to speak with us. And the Night Crickets record, A Free Society, is just fantastic. There's such a feel to this record. It's like there's this tastefully subversive yet so accessible feel to these songs. Could you just tell me a little bit about how this project came together?
Yeah. Well, initially, my manager, Mr. Darwin Miners, who's also a great musician in his own right, I produced his solo record a while back. He met up with Victor De Lorenzo from the Virgin, from
Violet Femmes.
Yes, Violet Femmes. I was going to say Virgin Prunes then, but it's a very different situation. Yes, Violet Femmes. When they played at Coachella, I saw them play with Darwin, and then after their set, he was backstage and he met Victor, and they kind of hit it off, and then they carried on corresponding via email, and the idea came up for them to do some collaboration. It's actually Darwin that suggested it to Victor, and then Victor said, well, yeah, I'm into that, but how about including David? So they asked me if I'd like to be part of this endeavor, and I said yes, and we did it remotely as a bit of an experiment with no real expectations of where it was going to go. This was during like heavy lockdown time,
right?
And it was good to have a project like this, so we just worked remotely, and we would just trade recordings, and usually it would be Victor who kicked it off with a drum beat, and then he'd send that more than likely to me, and my process with these tracks, all of the tracks, was that I would not listen to them until I was in the studio ready to do a take, and I'd usually start with a bass line, and sometimes I wouldn't even hear the track until we'd roll, tape,
yeah,
as it were, and I just like go, and a lot of those tracks are first takes.
Wow.
And it's kind of uncanny, really, because I was changing where the changes were, although I'd never heard the track before, if you're with me. So we had this flow, kind of an uncanny flow right from day one. And then I would send my contribution, on top of Victor's to Darwin, and he would lay down either keyboards or guitar or vocal if it came to mind, and then send back to Victor for him to add more overdubs, be it vocal, keyboards, percussion. Then Victor would send back to me. I'd probably do a vocal and some drones. I have this wonderful box of delights. I got it's from Bombay. It's called a Rajini,
Oh wow.
and it's a little electronic drone box. Um, and it's a wonderful thing. You can change the pitch and the timbre of it, and that is used throughout the album. You can hear that. It's almost like the glue that holds everything together.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that was the process. That's how it happened. And then we just started. It was such a flow. We decided to keep going with it. And then we suddenly realized, oh, wait a minute, we're making an album here. So that's what happened.
Well, what's the first song that came together on this? There's so many just classic tracks on this.
That's a good question. I haven't thought about that. It was all done in such a kind of fever dream,
Yeah, yeah.
What was the first song? I think it might have been Black Leather on the Inside.
Yeah, the album opener. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's interesting how that came about, because Victor sent over the beat. I'd heard it once, just heard this beat, and I was up late one night listening to a box set of Peter Loeffner tracks. You know Peter Loeffner?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay. He's kind of obscure but very influential, from Cleveland, Ohio, an original member of Perubu.
Right, right,
and
right.
And a singer-songwriter in his own right, a really brilliant guy who died tragically young at 24. But as I say, I was listening to this box set, and one of the tracks, it was vinyl, and then the stylus stuck, but it was making this kind of cool loop. So I grabbed my phone and started recording it. And then I had a fire going. It was in winter, log fire going, and so that sort of crackling and popping and roaring of a log fire is on this recording, and it has an atmosphere. And I just took it into the studio literally the next day, and flew it in at random, really, with Victor's drum beat, and it just syncopated perfectly. So we had a track for me, and I thought, well, as I've kind of cribbed from Peter Loeffner, the right thing to do is to make this a tribute to him. So off the top of my head, I wrote the lyrics, which are about Peter Loeffner, based a little bit on Lester Bang's obituary of Loeffner.
And this is on Black Leather
like
on
really spontaneous, and I just wrote that out in the flow, and then just went straight in and recorded the vocal. And that's really typical of the process. And then I sent it to Darwin, and he added to it, and then it went back to Victor, and it does the circuit again until we all feel, oh, it's done,
Yeah, yeah. And
add any more paint to this picture.
Well, the record that, like, just starting off with Black Leather on the Inside, the record does sound like a celebration, and especially when the lyrics get to the "Life is wearing thin" part. It's almost like a shedding skin song for me, almost in a way. And I
well,
feel...
it's what I'm talking about there is Loeffner's imminent mortality, and that he didn't have long to go, and I think he was aware of that.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah. Well, now how far back do you go with Victor?
Not that far, No, I only met recently,
Right.
I hadn't met Victor before. Well, it was just after the Violent Femmes, the gig at Coachella. I'm a long time fan, big time, Violent Femmes, very influential on Love and Rockets. And in fact, I told Victor this story, which she enjoyed, which is when we made our first two albums at a studio in Leamington Spa called Woodbine. Really good engineer, a co-producer, really, John A. Rivers. We wanted to go in a bit of a different direction for a third record and make it more acoustic. and just more less layered, really. And the record we were playing all the time when we were making Express, which is the album before, was the first Violent Femmes album. And we used to rock that in the kitchen, at the studio, and in the car, you know. And John came in one time and he said he wasn't into it. He said, I don't know what you guys see in this band. And so we questioned him about it. He said, really, we love this band. You don't get it? He said, no, it sounds terrible to me. It's just really badly recorded and it's too raw. And because of this, we were going to go with John for the third album, but because of that, we decided not to go with him because he wasn't on the same wavelength as us. So we got our old engineer, Derek Tompkins, out of retirement. Derek was the engineer on Bela Lugosi's Dead and some early Bauhaus stuff, and we brought him in, and he got it. We played him Violent Femmes, and he dug it, you know. Although he was like, at that time, he was like in his mid-50s, but he got it.
Right.
And we made an album called Sun Moon with him. But that Violent Femmes album was very influential.
Yeah, yeah. And now you and Darwin, how far do you all go back?
We've been together now for about 12 years, I guess. And how we met was amusing. I had a DJ gig just down south near the Mexican border, and he was playing in a Love and Rockets tribute band, and he was on the bill. The agent had bought. He asked me. He said, "I've got this wacky idea. There's this tribute band who are very good, Love and Rockets. Would you be cool with them being on the same bill as you when you DJ?" I said, "Yeah, that sounds like a hoot." So I went into this club, and the first person I saw in there was Darwin. He was having a drink, and we just nodded, and I joined him, and then I just caught the end of their sound check. That's right, and then he sat down and had a drink, and so I joined him, and he said to me, really glad we could do this, and thank you for not suing us. So I said to him, "It's early." And he cracked up, and then that we just really hit it off. And then they played, and they were damn good. And I ended up joining them for I sang on No New Tale to Tell.
Oh my gosh!
As their encore. And then we just kept in touch. And I said, "Do you make music outside of this band?" He said, "Oh yeah, I write my own songs." I said, "Well, let me hear them." He sent me some demos, and I was really knocked out with them. And I instantly thought, I'd like to produce you. So I ended up producing his album.
Nice. That's got to be surreal how that whole situation comes around for both of you. For him to be playing in a cover band like that.
Yeah. And in conversation, it became very evident that he really understood where I was at. He knew my history. And he was very appreciative, and he's a very smart, savvy guy. And I thought he could be a really good manager. I didn't have a manager at the time, so I put that to him. So we had a trial period of 6 months, and it really clicked. So yes, he's also my manager.
Well, given how busy you all are right now, I mean, is there any chance for live shows of this?
We have talked about it. I don't know, but the thing is, I mean, the market is really bad at the moment, even for big bands, even, for like Bauhaus. And although, I mean, we're doing better than a lot.
Right.
It's just because of the, basically the world situation coming out of COVID and the war in Ukraine, awful war, just the economy, people not having money, it's very beleaguered. So it's not really the right time to think about going out with a new venture. Maybe in the future things settle down,
Right.
We have talked about it, although it would be kind of difficult because it was conceived as a studio project. And it's very much that. I mean, using the studio as an instrument in a way, the old Brian Wilson thing. So we would take some wrangling and some working out how to do it live, but it's not impossible. You know, you can use samples and loops and stuff like that, and then, you know, the real instruments alongside that.
Right.
So it's possible, yeah, in the future.
Well, how are the Bauhaus shows going?
Fantastic. I mean, you
I really want to.
You know, we feel like we're playing better than we've ever played.
Yeah, I can see that, and I mean, to me, I'm 48. That show out at Cruel World was a real reaffirmation of everything I believe in. I mean, it scalded my brain.
Oh, great. Thank you.
And one thing I wanted to discuss about that is, you know, I was out there hired in a Georgia pine. There's a lunar eclipse, and Peter just appears on those big screens on the side as some kind of satanic Wizard of Oz, and you guys unleash a truly magical performance. I mean, I was transfixed for days at the simplicity and the effectiveness of that opening. Do you remember the time that you used that trick? I know it was earlier in you guys' career when you used the trick of filming Peter off stage, and you guys going into
really early, like 1980, at the Rock Garden in London, and we had a TV monitor on the stage, and then he sang Double Dare from the dressing room, in real time, you know, being filmed and relayed to the monitor. So that was the first time we did that. Then we revived it in '98 on that tour, and we had a even bigger screen.
Yeah.
And then we thought, let's do it again, because we knew we were going to have these big video screens, you know, and the quality of the image is so much better than it's ever been. And also, I mean, there was a bit of a reveal there, because it was the first time Peter had appeared with his shaved head.
Right.
You know. A la Yul Brynner. And actually his outfit is based on Yul Brynner's costume in The King and I.
His outfit was fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really suits him, that look. We've actually been trying to get him to do that for a long time,
right,
for years.
Right.
And he finally did it. It looks great, you know.
Well, and you know, to go along with that opening on Double Dare, if you don't get that first note, I think it's the most sinister note in rock and roll. The opening of that song when you come in with it.
Yeah, it's a double note. It's I play, you know, it's it's the same note, but it's played on different strings through the heavy fuzz box.
Right. Well,
and I actually love that moment. It's a sort of protean moment of the space before the note.
Oh, yes.
And I like to really sort of psych into that space and feel the potential in that space. It's very potent.
Absolutely.
It's a very magical thing.
Well, that brings me. I'd love to discuss. I've got a few more questions for you if you have the time. I would love to discuss your book, the excellent "Who Killed Mr. Moonlight," Bauhaus, Black Magick and Benediction. I really get a sense of who you are in this story. It doesn't shy away from the facts, but it dispenses with the usual mean-spirited, score-settling bullshit that a lot of these projects fall prey to. How difficult was it putting this book together?
It was a challenge, but I felt very much compelled to write it. I just wanted to write. I mean, I just felt I had to write that book. And it took me 7 years to write it. And I was sort of on and off kept journals, and I've got all my day books going back to 1980. So that was all very useful.
Yeah.
I had a guy, Andrew Brooksbank, who's a bit of an authority on the band, and he put together this great timeline, very detailed. So with all those elements at my disposal, I was able to, you know, tap into my memories and put it together. I mean, it's not written, as you know, it's not written um, in a conventional way, really. In fact, at the time I was co-writing some screenplays, and that played into it just the way one writes for film.
Yeah.
I imagined these real experiences as scenes in a movie, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a good device, and it made it very vivid, and gave it some momentum, I think, and made it visually arresting.
It's so readable. I mean, it's
Yeah,
it's got a cast of characters that I don't want to spoil here, but I mean, you've truly lived and are living an artistic, just fantastic life, man. When I look at some of the people that you've had the opportunity to interact with, I mean, both professionally and
being fortunate in that way.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And
But I think you can make those things happen. No, that's magic.
yeah, and that's
the type of magic,
That's what I wanna. That leads me into the next question. You've never been afraid to just go there, in both your art and your life. So, upon reflection, how do you feel that your explorations with magic and psychedelics have informed your art and your life?
Intrinsically,
Right.
yeah. That's that. The influence of all those elements is, ongoing. Um, I I pulled back from ritualistic magic because it's so unwieldy and rather dangerous. But because you're dealing with elements that are unknown, and even if you are very learned magician, which I don't claim to be at all, you can end up with a tiger by the tail, and then it's what you do with that thing. But I'm very grateful for the lessons that I garnered during that very intense period, particularly with Alan Moore when I was working with him, and he kind of inducted me into the whole realm, the magical realm, and I'm still in touch with it. And I think I've always been of a disposition where I use visualization, and I'm in tune with that which lies beyond the veil, as it were, psychically adept, I suppose. But I've just pulled back from the ritual side of it because it can get out of control.
Right. Well, what Alan's words in the intro to your book are some of they're so stirring and amazing. So you're still in contact with him because he was
sure.
He was an early supporter of Bauhaus from early on, correct?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. He wrote one of our first features actually in sounds when he was writing for that music paper.
Right.
It was a positive writer. Yeah.
Yeah, and another collaborator that you've had that's a friend of the podcast is Jarbo, and
okay.
You appeared on her Record the Men album, and you appear on King David, and she is thanked in your book. What is her art and her friendship meant to you over the years?
Well, I've only seen her, I mean, infrequently, but it's always wonderful when we do get together. I think she's a pure artist.
Absolutely.
Her motivation is coming from a very pure place, and she's very powerful. And she's something of a magical conduit, I think, for a certain type of energy. It's very focused, and I have a lot of respect for her.
Right. She's incredibly prolific. I recommend anybody going down the rabbit hole with her solo work. But One last question I wanted to ask you. We're speaking to you from Athens, Georgia, and one of the legendary shows mentioned here in town is when you appeared at World Famous on your house show tour. Do you have any recollections of our little music town, or is it all just a blur of dates when you do something like that?
No, I have recollections. Yeah, sure. In fact, doing that circuit, my recollections are more vivid than playing clubs, because clubs and even theatres tend to all blur into each other. But with doing what is called a living room tour, but it's sometimes outside of an actual living room. But it's you're visiting people's personal spaces, and it's very obviously eclectic and diverse, and I love doing that circuit.
Yeah.
It's very stimulating for me, and it's just so reciprocal, and it's obviously very intimate. And I really like to talk to the audience members after playing, and it's very kind of moving, what they say, what your music means to them, and that's very gratifying. It's soul satisfying. Whereas if you're playing in clubs and a tour, in big venues, you tend to just do the gig and then go. You don't see anybody, so you're not in contact with that intimate connection.
Yeah.
So that's a very special part of doing living room shows.
Well, I got those stories, the people you talked to that night and the show, excuse me, still reverberate here in this town. People still talk about it, so
I'll have to come back one day.
Absolutely. Well, where would be the best place for people to get in touch with you or follow the Night Crickets, or just Night Crickets?
Well, we just started an Instagram, so that's a good starting point. And there's going to be a website, also Bandcamp. Bandcamp's good.
All right. Well,
yeah.
Well, David, we want to thank you so much for taking your time today. It is truly an honor. We've wanted to have you on this podcast since we started it. So thank you so much.
Well, pleasure.
I want to thank David J. for coming on the podcast. It was so amazing to be able to talk to him about his new project, Night Crickets, which I urge you to check out, and also to be able to discuss Bauhaus and his just amazing, interesting artistic life. And make sure to go catch Bauhaus if you can here on tour. They're coming to a town near you very soon, and they are absolutely on fire. So make sure you go out and check them out, and check out his book, Night Crickets, everything. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for all the wonderful feedback we've been getting for all the episodes, and stay switched on, and we'll talk to you soon.